Hello, and welcome to episode number 64 of the Everybody Dice podcast. I am Steve, and today I am joined by.
It's Daryl. Hello.
And.
Ian.
There we go. Cool. How are you guys doing?
I've
Yeah,
really
pretty good.
struggled getting food into my really tiny mouth today.
Oh no,
Uh,
poor man with your tiny afflicted mouth.
My mouth is so tiny.
Just a very, very small
Really
mouth.
struggled. Keep finding comic books under dumpsters.
Finding your true father.
We've been watching Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, and a couple of the stories have just tickled us a bit. What was the other? Like, I'm sure you'll work the other line in here somewhere along the way.
I wrote it down because it made me laugh so much. It was something that Riker says. So obviously it's hosted by Jonathan Frakes, who plays Riker in Star Trek.
Yeah.
But there's a line he said in like the last episode we watched, which obviously at
So
that
good.
point we had consumed our peak amount of alcohol for the evening.
Yeah.
He says, "Is this another? What is it? Is this another destination on the road of truth, or a rest stop on the highway of lies?" It really made me laugh. It's just
good.
a rest stop on the highway of lies.
It's such a good little TV series. It's like from the late 90s, and it's just one of these kind of stupid TV programs where they feed you 5 stories over the course of 45 minutes. And at the end, you have to guess which ones were real and which ones were fake. And they're all kind of like these stupid, like supernaturally kind of stories. So, let's think which ones stood out the most out of all the ones we watched. The one which really stood out for me was the truck that got lost, and
Oh
it
yeah,
had mattresses on the back of it, and a
Oh
kid
yeah, the kid.
falls out a window and lands on the mattresses. But the only reason the truck went down that road was because an old woman appeared in the middle of the road, and in the apartment where the kid fell from, the old woman's up there, and
but
yeah,
passed out.
but passed out. Yeah.
My favourite was the one of the man who gave out fake degrees online.
yeah.
And obviously
Oh,
people sent him money for these fake degrees.
yeah.
He said he'd give them their money back if they didn't get a job. And then a man turned up with a voodoo doll of him, threw it on the floor, and it burst into flames, which is obviously rubbish immediately. But then he goes back to his office, and according to Riker, because of the voodoo curse, he smashes a hole in his wall to store all of his ill-gotten money in ironed out notes, and then dies of radiation poisoning because he removed a lead lining and there's a radiologist next door. And it's just, what?
Mental.
It's just an awful chain of completely impossible events. And it's just, why does he have a lead, like, oh, just, there's no way his office had a lead-lined wall next to a radiology. There's no reason that a curse would be the reason that he decided to put a hole in that wall. The voodoo dolls don't just burst into flames. That's a lie. Sorry to break your heart if you're into voodoo. That's not a thing that happens.
Oh boy.
God.
Anyway,
What's your favourite, Daryl? You must have a favourite.
I think exploding peanuts.
Oh,
I
that's-
think.
oh,
I think purely
that's
just
nothing
based
to
on
do with
fact-
the story, but it was funny.
I think there's two that stood out for me, and I think it's mainly because we ripped on them. Was the exploding peanuts, where two girls are walking around in what I would say is a very overused cemetery set.
It's used in like every episode. There's at least
Yeah.
one part where they're in that
Um,
cemetery.
And then they happen to be opening a bag of extremely loud peanuts as a gunshot goes off. To which point they see someone running away in sort of haste or whatever, and then they come back and find someone that's dying who's been shot, and then explains who the killer is. But the whole thing never happened.
I
Because it
think,
was happened like 2 years prior, didn't it?
yeah.
yeah.
Honorable mention to the one with the homeless man who finds a comic book under a
Oh,
dustbin and gives it to a man who runs a newspaper stand in exchange for 20 quid. He then gets a job given to him by the newspaper man, who turns out to be his dad with cancer. and then leaves everything to him. And the only reason he knew that it was his son is because he had the belt buckle he used to beat him with when he was a child.
Which is crazy.
And then
That's such a dark turn.
And then Riker suggests that the dad left the magazine under the bin for his son to find because he heard was in the area. And it's just how can he confirm that the son was going to find it? Why did he assume that his son was going to bring it to him? And there's just so many things that are wrong with it. But the best part of it is that the man, Justin Chatwin, has the tiniest mouth.
It became a bit of a running joke in the end.
It was a good running joke. It's nice when they use the same people because then we started going,
Every-
wait a
every-
minute, that's
every
that
time-
person.
Tiny mouth showed up. We were like, have you ever seen a man with a tiny mouth?
Tiny little man.
I think one more episode I really want to give an honourable mention to as well was the one with the man who could touch coins and see into the past
Oh, yeah.
as well. I
That
think
was so
Another brilliant
ridiculous.
yeah, I think that was a cracker as well. But I don't want to spoil too much for our audience,
think
but point
The
them
best
towards.
bit is you watch a story that can only be complete bullshit. And then at the end, Riker explains to you why it could be bullshit or why it could be true. But like he quite often brings something into the story that was never really hinted at in the story, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Why would that be the case? So that the newspaper one's a perfect example. It goes, did the father know his son was in the area and planted the comic book under the bin for him to find? And we're like, no one thought that while watching this. No one was thinking. Did
Can
you
we,
miss that from filming and you had to tell us that because it was important and you missed it? Or are you just... Oh, I don't know.
I mean, only
we
an
just make
imbecile
an-
would plant that there and expect things to turn out the way they did.
It's just
Sorry.
exactly, yeah.
Can we please just there's one thing that is sublime, and I don't want to say they're sketches. They are the intros to each story,
Yeah.
where it's the same set. So he's in this really nice kind of like library with all these various different knickknacks, but every single sort of intro before that, he does something ridiculous. And probably the best one ever was him just bringing a wheelbarrow into shot with a load of gardening tools in it about a crime that basically someone dies.
No grass will grow on his grave.
Yeah, and no grass
Yeah.
will grow on it. But it's just the wheelbarrow, the wheeling of the wheelbarrow. There was one with a fortune cookie where he's just eating takeaway Chinese on a table.
Yeah.
They're
think
just
the best
so
thing
good.
about the wheelbarrow one is that we just watched one of the bits, and we were arguing amongst ourselves about how stupid it was, and we're all really irritated by what we've just seen, and irritated at Riker for making assumptions about the thing we'd just seen, and we were getting really annoyed about it. And there was like a maybe 2-second gap in conversation where we just all had stopped talking, and we turned around the TV, and Riker comes out with the wheelbarrow and looks at us and says this weird little one-liner, and we all just pissed ourselves laughing. We just that's what made it for me. It was, I can't even remember what he said, but it was
it was so good.
ridiculous.
It's
There was
almost
the bit where
always
he
a
was like,
question,
"Oh,
isn't
dude."
it? Like, have you ever
Yeah,
spent a
it's
night
like-
in the graveyard? And
I think he said something like along the lines of like it was a joke about like the soil or like something like that, and we all just, it broke all of us all at once.
yeah. But you get like there's a meme out there, like a video of him I think it was just called Jonathan Frakes Asks You Stuff, and it's all taken from Beyond Belief, Fact and Fiction, and it's just
Do you
him.
remember the largest man you've ever seen?
Have you ever
The
written your
tallest
name
one
in
is-
wet cement? It's
Yeah.
just
So good.
oh, brilliant. Anyway, games, board games, stuff like
Board
that.
games.
Yeah,
Shall we
board
talk a little
games,
bit about
games.
them? How about we start with a little bit of news?
Tiny little bit of news.
From my tiny little mouth. Okay, so first of all, it's
just chat with. Where we just got it, just so people can see how tiny his mouth is. Sorry.
no.
I'm gonna
Anyway.
find a picture of him where his mouth is really tiny, so you can use it.
Oh, okay. Perhaps I will. Anyway, it's that time of year again, and the Spiel Des Jahres has now been and gone, and the winner of it this year has been announced as Micro Macro Crime City. Um, so this is a really interesting one. It's almost kind of an appropriate game to put as the Spiel des Jahres for the year we've just had, where people can't really play games together and stuff like that. It's a game that can be played solo. Essentially, it's Where's Wally, but as a board game. So what you do is the actual first case that you solve is actually just on the front cover of the game box. It usually asks you to find something. But by finding something, you then start tracing back where it came from. So across the map, the pictures will kind of show events happening as they were going. So it's almost as if it was taken from Google Maps or something like that. So in other words, have you ever seen like any of those photos before of like a kid running down the street caught on Google Maps, and then you move over to the next slide and the kid's fallen over and stuff like that? There's like a
Yeah.
there's like a Google Maps fails Twitter account, I think, that like covers a load of stuff like that. So micro macro crime city is kind of done on that same sort of line. So it's as if it's all been photoed over time and then stitched together. So you start working out how certain crimes have happened by first of all finding the starting point that it asks you to find, and then tracing back what happened, and it'll ask you a series of questions as to exactly how did this crime happen. It's a really neat little game, and definitely one, like I say, it's just really appropriate to give this one. I don't know whether it is necessarily the best game of the year. It's one that none of us have played, I believe. I certainly haven't played it anyway. But I've seen a lot of people talking about this, and it just fits the mold quite nicely. Like, if you ask me what were the best board games of the last year, I'm not sure I could really name very many, if I'm perfectly honest with you, because I haven't really had a chance to play very many games in the last year, like, with people. I don't know, would you agree with something like that? Like, can you
Well, we
guys
haven't
think
had
played
of...
a lot of
anything
chance.
new.
Yeah,
No.
exactly, that's what I mean.
Other than
Any
Crash
of the-
Octopus.
Yeah, there is stuff like that.
Is there any of the ones we have played that have been fairly new this year or not? Like, oh god, the one we were going to talk about later, and then the ones prior to that. We haven't actually played anything very new, have we?
No, I don't think we've played anything from the last year. Because really, we've only been playing board games again for what, the last 8 weeks or something like that. Other than playing stuff online,
Yeah.
there really hasn't been very much at all. And I think a lot of
No.
the games that we were playing online, quite a few of them were from last year. So there's a few
Yeah.
we've played, like, I don't think either of you guys were there for it, but we played like Cartographers. I think that was last year. Oceans, I think, was last year, I think, as well. Because we've basically got this backlog of games still to play from last year, where the pandemic's happened and we just haven't been able to play them. So we're playing catch up at the moment, really. But yeah, like, I'm not sure there's anything else I could name, to be honest.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
No.
I think it's a difficult scenario, isn't it? We're not exactly in a position to have played all the newest games, sadly.
But like I say, this looks like a perfectly acceptable winner of the Spiel des Jahres. A lot of people have been talking about it. A lot of people have been saying about how good this is. Essentially, you have a map in this box, a huge map. It's probably about the size of my gaming table. You also get a magnifying glass, and it is literally just, you've got these envelopes with each case written in it, and it just asks you to find stuff on the map and then trace it back and find out what's happened. I can't really get, like I say, I haven't played the game, so I can't really give any examples of what they are, but I've watched a few reviews on it, and it does just look really, really neat. But that's Micro Macro Crime City anyway. Congratulations on winning your Spiel des Jahres award. Okay,
Boom.
up next, Daryl, this is one that you'll probably be primarily talking about. It's the new Marvel Champions releases. So we talked a little while ago. Like, what was it? I think it was about a month ago, maybe, where we talked about the Mad Titan Shadow which is kind of like the new big
Yeah,
box Thanos
it's yeah.
expansion.
So it felt like they were doing a kind of theme thing on the last set, which was the Guardians of the Galaxy main campaign box, and everything sort of since then has been Guardians of the Galaxy based characters. I think there's still potentially Nebula's, I think, still coming out, and they did like Drax, Star Lord, all those kind of characters. So it's kind of interesting to see that they've got a little bit more kind of random characters. So they did an Agent Venom one. I think that's out now. War Machine looks incredible, by the way.
So it's
I
something
read
to do
about
with
that.
ammo counters, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
so it's another one like when we were talking about Beowulf in the
unmatched.
unmatched set. This sounds like this is going to play in a similar way, as in you've got this currency and you can
Yeah.
use it in conjunction with your cards in order to do more and stuff, which sounds kind of
So
cool.
I think there's a you lose it when you become goes back to roads roadie. Um, and then you can when you switch over to from hero form to alter ego, you start gaining counters, and it looked like there's a really nice synergy with his minigun chain gun type situation, where I think there was an event, and I know that the actual advert for it suggested that I think you can do something stupid like it's not on this one, but it was something like potentially the full auto one or something like that, and basically the amount of ammo counters that have, the more damage you can do. So potentially you could be doing something like stupid for every ammo count. But they're a currency again, like a bit like the Beowulf one. Once they're used, they're expended, and you have to kind of regain them. But it does look like a lot of his machine add-ons, like weapons, armor, all that kind of stuff, they generate during sort of various different things. So I think, for instance, so when you're James Rhodes, you choose a War Machine card in your discard pile and shuffle it back into your deck, which is incredible. So you're potentially even the event cards that say War Machine on, you're throwing them back in. So he's reloading, reloading, reloading. So that really fits the character really well. Alternative to that, you have to discard the ammo counters when you go back into War Machine's character. You get 5 ammo counters, so you're already kind of set up for that kind of hopeful I don't know, like combo where you're getting say 15 or 12 counters and you're doing so much damage per character. I think he's gonna be really good for that kind of heavy hitting kind of strategy. I find 4 is a bit like that as well. So he's not so good on potentially thwarting or like doing other stuff. He is just pure tank. Like the health isn't great on this one. It's 10. But again, it's it's going to be a case of he's there to deal the damage while someone else does all the other bits. Kind of parallel to that, they're releasing another scenario deck, which I think the last one of those was the Kang one, which is the
Yeah,
last one they brought out. So that's quite a while back, to be fair. So it's only been characters and in the actual campaign boxes, but the new one looks really good. So it's a character called the Hood, which initially I thought they'd started doing something with DC because obviously I was thinking of Red Hood.
oh, it's from
Uh,
Daredevil.
is it from Daredevil?
He's from
Okay, so I was
Daredevil.
thinking
Yeah.
about the Red Hood one because I was like, I'm not really familiar with the Daredevil stuff. The character looks really cool. It's just like a crime lord. There looks like there's a lot of crime characters from other sets they've kind of redone. So like Shocker's back in there. The 4 Wrecking Crew boys are in there from the Wrecking Crew set. Just all kind of revamped. And there's a lot of, I mean, Steve was talking about this earlier, there's a lot of modular sets now as well where they're throwing them into other games to make it a bit more kind of replay value. I know it's similar to what they're doing with the Mad Titan one. You can throw the Infinity Gauntlet deck into pretty much any scenario and give it to any character. So if you wanted like Green Goblin, for instance, with it, Green Goblin could have the Infinity Gauntlet, and it kind of it's nice they're doing this whole thing where they're bringing stuff in future sets that can go back to older sets and kind of change the way you play them.
Yeah, it actually
I
looks
know,
like that this is kind of got a real focus on those modular encounter sets. I
definitely, yeah,
mean, it's saying that you get 9 in this.
which is quite a lot for a smaller. I don't think. I think the other ones have only had about 3 or 4 that I can
Yeah,
remember.
but
So it's
this
quite a lot.
one, it seems to have a unique system to it, the Hood scenario pack, where you'll choose 7 modular encounter sets, not just from here, but also from the main base set as well. But it will start off with just one encounter deck shuffled into it, and then over the course of the game, you'll shuffle in more and more of the encounters, so it will get progressively stronger and stronger and stronger, which
Yeah, I think
sounds kind
that's a
of
really
unique.
cool concept. Yeah, it does. It's almost adds that level of kind of almost like a mini campaign in a way, where a lot of the scenarios are just sort of one and dones, and you just change them as you want to. So like the Green Goblin one was kind of basically you had 2 options. You could play the Green Goblin Mad. I think it was where he's just basically Green Goblin and Mad, or you could do one that was kind of interesting with Norman Osborn was the main character, but he would flip over to the Green Goblin. So much like the hero characters can swap over, he had like a business side of a deck and like a kind of crime deck, which was really really cool. So it kind of swapped how you wanted to do things. This looks like it could be a sorry, there's a dog outside whining. It could look like there's a kind of different style of kind of approach they're going with them. I know that they did something really cool with the Kang deck as well, which was really good. It's kind of you play it as a team, and then once you sort of vanquish the first kind of act, if you will, it splits you off into different time zones, which I think is very cool. So you all get individually broken up. Say you're playing as 4 people, each one of you would get shot off to a different point of time, solo fight that version of Kang, and then you kind of once you've done your scenario, join up with the next person, the next person, the next person before finally doing the big bad. And that was a really cool concept because it just added a little bit more flavor to it rather than just you do this, you beat this, next scenario, you do this, you beat this. It's a bit more, it seems like they're adapting a few more things from their card games, which is good.
Okay.
I think.
Right then. So yeah, that's it. Keep your eyes out because it seems like there's a lot of stuff coming for Marvel Champions at the moment.
Oh,
so
definitely.
A lot to look forward to right now. Okay. Next up, Ian, would you like to lead us in with this one? Because we are going to now be talking about a revamp of Kill Team, which is
what
on
a
its
beautiful
way.
photo.
If I can't think of a photo that more perfectly defines the concept of beating a man to death with a shovel. But
There it is.
Picture of member of the Death Corps and Krieg. So they're releasing it alongside. Well, the whole campaign's going to be called Octarius. So we briefly went over it last time, didn't we? I sort of screamed it in a frenzy.
Yeah.
As we were going through it all, but it's got its own website. So if you go on the Warhammer community page, you can look up all of the details and stuff. The long and short of it is, they're just completely revamping the system. So it's not points based anymore. It's like a list style system. So you pick like a character and they get choice of characters based on what style of unit they are. By the looks of things. So one of the examples they give, if you get like a commando knob, an orc guy, you can select 9 commando operatives from a following list, and there's a big list of different orcs you can get. So they've completely changed how that works, and I guess it just balances. So I guess if you're a specific type of character, you get 9, and then that is equivalent to, say, another faction that has 1 guy, and like a Custodes unit probably only have 3 people in because they're powerful. But a guardsman fire team includes 7 guardsmen, and you can choose from troopers, comms, gunners, etc., etc. Other things they're sort of adding to it is so there'll be the starting box set, which is the one pictured, so Octarius, and you get Death Corps Krieg, which really needed plastic models for that for the longest time. I think it's one of the more popular Imperial Guard factions. And then you get some of the coolest orc models I've seen for a long time.
Oh,
the orc
so nice.
commandos look really cool. Which I've been spamming Daryl with photos of because I know he wants it.
I
But yeah, they'll
like
be
you.
releasing a compendium alongside that start set that allows you to sort of pick different factions. So they've got a big list of the factions actually, which I have saved. So the factions as they are at the moment stand as Space Marines, Grey Knights, Imperial Guard, Forge Worlds, Ecclesiarchy, Traitor Space Marines, Death Guards, Orc Commandos, Thousand Suns, Talons of the Emperor, which is, I assume, Custodes and Sisters of Silence.
I imagine.
A bit the Inquisition, I guess, maybe. Chaos Demons, Craft Worlds, Veteran Guardsmen, Troops, which is Harlequins, Camorite, Dark Elder, Cadra Mercenaries, which is Tau that aren't Tau. So I assume like Kroot and Vespid. High Fleets, Tyrannids, Tomb Worlds, Necrons, Hunter Cadres, Tau that are Tau, Greenskins, which I assume Greenskins, the commando units will be small but elite, and the Greenskins units will be massive and awful.
Well, I'm wondering if it's I wonder if it's like grot based, which would be crazy.
I don't
or
think it's
those
grot
new
based.
ones.
The pictures they've shown are of Orc boys.
So
So
what the thing I'm confused about is where the new Beast Orcs fit into the whole, because they are 40k, aren't they? The new Beast Orcs with all the like
so
kind
I
of
mean,
savage.
the list it gives you for Greenskins is
Mm.
boys, Gretchens, Clan Commandos, Burner boys, Looter boys, and Spanner boys.
Okay.
And then for the Commandos, it's got Commando Knob, Commando Dacker Boy, Commando Breacher Boy, Commando Burner Boy, Commando Comms Boy, Commando Rocket Boy, Commando Slasher
God.
Boy, Commando
Sounds so
Sniper Boy, and Commando Grot. Commando, we done a Commando Knob, haven't we? And I think you can get the
Yeah.
Commando Squig, or like a Squig Bomb or something as well.
Yeah.
The last faction is Brood Covens, which is Gene Stealer Cults.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like they've sort of. I think they want a complete new start to Kill Team.
Yeah.
Old Kill Team was 40k, but small.
I mean, it was only recently I was hearing a lot of negativity around Kill Team. I know a lot of people were talking about how they weren't really enjoying Kill Team. There was one
The problem
website
with
that
Kill
was
Team
quite
was just that
laboured.
it's small 40k, and
Yeah,
40k doesn't really work that well
Mm.
in that style. Like games of 40k are either massive and unbearable, or sort of like 1,000 points and just about doable. I think if you get smaller than that, the balance gets thrown out the window.
But
Because obviously it's supposed to be for mass armies and balancing it with lots of different units. But I think with the way they've done it,
It does feel like more. I don't know. It's kind of nice that they've done that thing where you, depending on, like you say, the certain teams and factions, for instance, will have a lesser figure count as compared to some of the more basic figures. So it's cool that they've done that. Whereas, like, so it's not 10 of your characters versus 10 of mine, but 10 of yours are worth, say, like 15 to 20
I
of
mean,
mine.
you get fire teams. So in your kill team, you could have more than one fire team. In theory, I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm reading it as I see it, but obviously I've not got my hands on the rule book. So it does say that depending on your faction, kill teams need to be divided into one or two specialized groups called fire teams. Some factions can deploy 2 fire teams in single missions, while others hit the drop zone with 1. So Astra Militarum, for example, is the one they give. You're probably going to have a couple of squads of guardsmen. Whereas if you're dropping Custodes, it's probably going to be a guy and his mate.
Just a 2-dude team, that'd be cool.
I mean, that's all you need for Custodes. I think they've got a focus as well on. So previously we played Kill Team, and we found that Matt had a whole squad of Death Guard, and it was just unbearable because nothing could hurt them. I think the example they've given here is one fire team is 3 Death Guard, and then or 8 Poxwalkers. So what the intention there is, I suppose, for you to take 3 Death Guard to be your vanguard, your best units, and then your 8 Poxwalkers to add numbers, take kits, do whatever, take objectives, I guess.
They had a thing I read the other day looked quite interesting. Not all characters, not all units can actually claim objectives anymore, can they? So they've changed it so that you can't. I don't know what it was. It was something very specific, but they were saying that they can't be used to. Oh, it was like They had like a mindless ability now. It was on the data card for something. It was
stuff like
mindless.
zombies and like some tyrannid mob creatures and stuff. So
yeah. Cool.
I think it's just there to sort of clarify that not everything has the mindset of of like tactics of knowing what they need to do.
It's very good.
But I intend to be going into Kill Team with a squad of Khorne Berserkers. Whether they actually are looking at the factions, I don't know if that's even going to be possible. But long and short, I'm happy to play them as Chaos Space Marines with chainswords and stuff. But it would be nice if I could run a squad of Khorne Berserkers, and I would be even more delighted if they had a rule that meant they chop each other in half if they don't get any action quick enough.
I think when we originally, like, back before the previous version of Kill Team even came out, I think we were joking about having a small Khorne Berserker unit with Khan the Betrayer in, and just leaving it to a gamble as to who was going to win. Was Khan just going to turn on all the other Khorne Berserkers before the end of it? And
always my favourite bit of Khan the Betrayer is rolling the one and massacring his own squad.
yeah, so
It's just so funny.
It was kind of like playing Russian roulette with a squad of bloodthirsty berserkers, but you know.
I think that's fun though. That's the punishment. If they get into combat, you're probably going to kill everything. But I like the idea that it would be entirely possible that they care not from whence the blood flows and just kill each other.
Yeah. It would just be amusing either way. Anyway, that is enough from our news. Shall we move on to what we've been playing?
Yes.
Okay, so not really a lot to talk about this week. We've unfortunately struggled to be able to play very much, but we have played one or two things. First off, Ian, you'd like to update us on Crash Octopus.
I played Crash Octopus again with my wife, and it went completely differently to how we discussed it last time. So I wouldn't have brought it up a second time it went for the fact that it was the complete opposite experience. We constantly knock stuff off each other's boats. We've both got the hang of pinging a dice off the octopus's head. Every game goes to the end now, because previously what was happening was it was just whoever was quickest to pick up every item, because neither of us were good at knocking stuff off each other's, and we're both playing really cautious. Now, we're both pretty content with how to throw the dice at the head, and we're both playing a little bit more recklessly in order to get the game over, sort of thing. So every game goes to the end, because once you get to a certain point, there's a octopus attack like every one or two things you pick up. So you just, it was a completely different experience in that games actually lasted towards the end. There was one where we both had 4 on our boat, and Laura went first and missed, and I went second and got mine on in the last go.
Okay.
But it triggered an octopus attack.
Okay, so
And she threw the dice, hit the octopus, and knocked my stuff off. And so the game ended with her having more bits on her boat. It was a completely different experience to what I was saying before, which was, oh well, we just get everything on the boat and it's done.
So, has this made the game more enjoyable for you? Because last time we talked about Crash Octopus, I think you were kind of on the fence with Crash Octopus.
I enjoyed it, but felt like because the games were so short, it wasn't worth setting up.
Yeah.
But I feel like if the games are going to go on that long, and there was that much more interaction, then I'm probably wrong.
So is it safe to say then that this is a game that just requires everyone that's playing to just get a bit more practice in, and eventually the games will get more interesting?
A bit riskier.
Okay.
Get a bit more gung-ho, and then stuff just happens. I also think it's a game that benefits from more players. I've only played it in the 2-player mode, and I feel like if there were 4 people, even stray stuff is hitting other people's boats at that point. And there's more things you can put in front of other people. You control each other a bit more. The events mean 4 people get turns, so there's dice going off for everything. Just feel like the more people, the more hectic it becomes, and I guess the more of a gung-ho masterclass it is, because no one knows who's going to win at that point, because the person with the most on their boat now has 3 people chucking dice at them. So I think, I think the more people, the merrier with what I'm saying. I'm thinking we should give it a go with as many people as we can. I think 4's the max. And just see, because obviously it is going to be a different game once you take it away from it being 1v1.
Have you tried the pirate ship yet?
No.
Okay. So
it's next on the list.
Yeah, so just to let people know, if they don't know, the pirate ship is kind of like an additional like a modular rule that you can throw into it if you want to. There's that, and there's the island as well, I think.
Yeah, we use the island every time.
Yeah,
It's just adds that extra bit of interest.
yeah. Okay.
But we haven't tried the pirate ship yet.
Yeah, there's also a couple of other completely different ways to play the game as well, isn't there? One of them
It's like
is
mini games, I'd say.
yeah, one of them is literally almost like a practice aim kind of game sort of thing where was it you had your boats in separate corners of the circle or something and you have to flick 5 items from a distance or something at them or something
Uh,
along the
I
lines of
can't
that.
remember
But
because we read it weeks ago and we haven't looked back at them after reading them initially. But they
yeah,
all did seem like that sort of thing where it's taking individual aspects of the game and practicing them separate from playing the game.
yeah. There is also a solo mode as well, which I haven't looked too much into. Um, but yeah, there is that as well to Octopus Crash. But anyway, anything else to add, or shall we move on? We'll
No,
move
move on.
on. Okay, so
No.
absolutely flawless here. Okay, so
Beautiful.
last up, our last item on this podcast. It
Oh my
has
gosh.
really flown through today. We have Aeon's End that we played very recently. This pretty much took up an entire game night, and it's probably one of the reasons why we don't quite have as much to talk about here. Um, it's a really interesting game where you've kind of got a number of boss characters, so you choose one at the beginning. We played with the starter one, which was a character called the Rageborn, and the idea is it's almost like a boss fight from a video game, and you're all just trying to cooperatively take down a boss. There's a deck building element to it, but it doesn't quite play like traditional deck building because your cards are all kept in a very certain order. Your decks are never shuffled. So it actually tells you what your starting hand is at the beginning of the game for your character, and it also tells you all of the other cards that are in your deck and what order to put them in. And then the idea is that as you play cards, you can kind of organize in what order you're putting them into the discard pile, because that discard pile will eventually get flipped over and you'll start drawing off the top again for cards. So you can kind of start programming how things are going to work. So, like, for example, there are certain spells in the game where they're more powerful if you discard cards to go with them or destroy cards and get rid of them out of your deck entirely. So you may want to try and program your deck in such a way that when that card comes up, there'll be a couple of kind of useless cards put with it so that you know when it comes up you can actually do that. Everyone starts off with 10 health as well. That's not necessarily what's most important, though. What's most important is there's a location called Gravehold, which starts at 30 health. When that hits 0 HP, the game's over. Everyone else, if everyone gets knocked well, I think it says you become exhausted. If everyone that's playing becomes exhausted, you also lose the game. So as long as one person has health, you're fine. And everyone else can actually keep playing even once they're down to 0 health. But the caveat to that is that if you have no health and you're exhausted and you take damage at that point, the damage is doubled and then converted to the Gravehold instead. So the Gravehold will actually take double damage to what the player was originally going to get. The boss character starts with a variable amount of health, depending on what you're actually fighting against, and has its own constructed deck. Essentially, you have kind of a basic Nemesis deck, and then you have decks related to each boss character, so unique abilities that each boss character will have. And each card is split into one of 3 acts, so you make a pile of all the Act 1 cards, all the Act 2 cards, all the Act 3 cards. Then you shuffle the third act cards, put them down, do it with the second, put them on top of the third, and then do the Act 1 cards and put them on top. And essentially it's going to be drawing cards on its turn, and it's going to be doing nasty stuff either to the players or to Gravehold. It's as simple as knocking the boss down and getting rid of all its health, but the boss can do nasty stuff like summon minions. You also, like most deck building games, you're building currency, which you're then going to be spending at almost kind of like a shop. You've kind of got this menu of cards which are made up of 3 gems. Gem cards tend to give you more currency. So if you want to start building more currency more quickly on your turn, buy a gem card. You have relics, which tend to be one-use items that will have quite a powerful effect, but then it's used and it's gone. And then you will have 4 spell cards on this menu as well. They tend to be your damage dealers. So you're going to start off with a relatively weak deck of cards. It's kind of cool because every different character has their own unique card that's in their deck. Plus, then they've also got a power as well. The powers, we only used a power once in the entire game because it
Yeah, I
takes a
think we
while
did.
to charge them up. Your currency that you gain in the game is used for all manner of things. It sometimes will be used to buy cards. Sometimes you may need to use your currency in order to get rid of a nasty effect that the boss has put on you. You may use it in order to start putting charges on your character, which will eventually let you use your super strong ability. But you also have 4 breaches, which are attached to your character. Although in Daryl's case, the character he chose only had 3. Um, and the breaches, when they're opened, and every character starts with at least 1 open breach. Some of them start with 2. That's how you cast your spells. You don't simply say, I'm playing this card and casting the spell. You have to put it on a breach, and that's prepped your spell. And when it comes round to your next turn, you can choose to cast it at that point. It is worth noting as well that turns are not cyclical, I suppose would be the word you'd say. So you have a deck of player numbers. That deck is shuffled along with a couple of Nemesis cards, and then you start flipping over, and that determines the player order. It was interesting because the game we played had a wild suit in it, which meant we had to choose between the 3 of us which one of us gets an extra turn in the round. So we would all get 1 turn, we would have 1 extra turn in a 3-player game, which we got to choose between, and the Nemesis would get 2 turns. That was basically how things were doing. The Nemesis, though, the reason why they get more turns than any individual person, it kind of balances out simply because a lot of the Nemesis's attacks don't trigger immediately. They usually trigger a couple of turns later or something like that, or it'll put a minion out which won't do anything on the first turn, but the next time its turn comes around, it will usually have a persistent effect. Okay, now that I've explained how the game goes, I really like this game. I think it's an excellent deck builder. I think it's unique from other deck building games as well. What did you guys make of it?
I'd like to play it again.
Try
Yeah, we
some
did say that,
big
didn't we?
nastier beasties.
Yeah, that's really, really, really good.
Kind of. I think it sort of ticked all the boxes, didn't it? We were saying before that it wasn't a case of with other games where like maybe one aspect of it was cool, one aspect was a little bit not so good. It had a really interesting lore to it. I know Ian found it quite fond to sort of read the backs of the cards and the characters and the bosses, sort of learn the different sort of histories and stuff. There, there was an interesting shared resource kind of style of things where you had to kind of sort of pick quite early on who was going to buy what. I think because Ian's character worked really well, him buying the what was the card you kept getting that really helped when you lined up your it was the one with the like the yellow
I had
one
a
that was like 5.
mix of one that opened like rifts or breaches,
We made
and
sure
one
all of
that
us
did
had some of that, but yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
one that did more damage for every every breach I had open.
Yeah, so it worked really well for both Ian and Stephen to have those because they had 4 breaches at their disposal, whereas where I only had the 3, to be fair, I actually didn't do a lot in terms of sort of planning wise because where I had the less amount, I couldn't do too much. My overall plan was to try and heal them, but by the time I actually got around to getting some of the healing cards, the guys were like, "We could do them in like 2 turns." So it was a really interesting concept with kind of this shared resource pool and collection, because I think the other thing I really enjoyed was planning ahead with the cards. Like when you would discard, well, you wouldn't discard your cards, but once you've used them, you put them down in what order. So it was trying to almost plan ahead to the next time you draw up, you will be getting use of one of those kind of cards that are not just a sort of a resource or whatever. They're something that's going to help you kind of trigger the spell, and then kind of do the next thing, which it was cool. I mean, I like the randomness of the kind of scenarios. So like when they would draw a card, it would do something really good. There was a couple of times where it got a bit hairy for us, where we had to like defeat a big monster that was a side minion, and then it had like enough effects if we didn't do it. Yeah, it's cool. I enjoyed it.
What I wanted to point out when you said about the planning and stuff like that, I think one of the things, and when you say shared resources as well, I think what you really mean is like the shared information that you have, because unlike a lot of other deck building games, you can have your cards out in front of you. You can start seeing what other people have got this turn in their hands, because a lot of these games will usually say, although this is a cooperative game and we like to
Yeah.
encourage conversation, don't tell people what cards you've got. You know, a lot of games will say that. This one doesn't do it, and what it does by doing that is, I think it doesn't eliminate, but it certainly lessens alpha gaming. Alpha gamers and stuff like that, because we were talking amongst ourselves how we can feed off one another and how we can use one another's cards in order to complement one another and stuff like that. And that's something you don't get in a lot of cooperative games, because everyone still has to have some secret information usually. It means you may have people barking orders around the table at everyone else because they can't say why, but they want everyone to do a certain something because it's going to benefit them later. But by having that shared information around the board, we do talk, and we were all sharing ideas of how to approach the next turn, or who's going to take that wild turn this
Yeah.
time around and stuff like that. And it's something that I I don't get very often in cooperative games, and I understand the need for like alpha gamers and stuff like that, because sometimes it helps other people along a bit. Sometimes it might feel like they're just sitting along for the ride and stuff like that, but sometimes it can help kind of like move the game along and stuff. But alpha gamers still shut out other players, and this is a really good way of being able to converse around the table. And perhaps if one player's not cooperating with the rest of the table, perhaps two players can cooperate with each other whilst another two try and work their way around that. So you can quite easily start planning around the table how you're going to organise yourselves with other people. I think it's a really interesting idea, and it's quite nice to have that freedom. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention as well is the replay value of this game,
Oh
and
yeah.
it goes deeper than having 4 different bosses for this game as well. The amount of combinations you can have of that menu of items there's a lot that you get in the starter box, so you might switch out some of your gems for other gems or spells for other spells, and there's hundreds of thousands of different combinations of spells and stuff you've got to play around with, not to mention all the characters that all have their different character skills and their own individual card as well that's mixed in there, and you've got the 4 bosses to try out and play through. It's got a hell of a lot to it, and this game's got a lot of expansions too. So even if it starts getting old, there's still a lot more out there for this game.
Yeah.
And it feels like you've already got enough content in this box to keep you kind of happy for a while. What were your thoughts coming out of this, Ian? I know you haven't gotten to expand on it too much just yet.
Yeah, I think one of the bits that I found very enjoyable is I quite like to plan ahead exactly what I'm doing and set out what my goals are for a game, because you could decide what order your deck went in when you discarded things to some extent. You could do that, but not only that, everyone was doing that. So you knew what order you were putting things in. Daryl knew what order he was putting things in. I knew what order. And when it came to a point where we had to make a discussion as a group, we're like, oh, well, I've got this, this, and this coming next, or I should have this coming soon. I know I had a card which allowed another player to draw a card and then discard a card.
Mm.
So it was very much a group activity, and everyone was engaged, and everyone was sort of an equal participant in getting that game, getting rid of that bad guy, basically. And like everyone played their own role to some extent, which is that's my favourite part about it. I quite like cooperative games. I don't think there's enough good ones. I think that one was challenging enough that we felt entertained by doing it, but there was no point where we were like, this is impossible.
Mm.
So I brought up when we were playing it. Do you remember the Dread game? I can't remember what it's called now.
Cursed
Oh,
Earth.
Cursed
yeah,
Earth.
the Judge
And
Dredd one, yeah.
every time we played Dread Cursed Earth, I felt like, okay, well, this isn't going to happen. Like, Judge Giant is almost already dead because we always bully Judge Giant. But it was just one of those where I feel like we did complete it once on its easiest mode, and it's
We
just there are so many other difficulty settings that are almost irrelevant because I don't think they're doable. Whereas with this game, we're on the easiest mode, it was challenging, and we got right to the end. But I feel like with luck, preparation, couple of plays of it, we could do harder levels. And yeah, I think it
Actually,
struck a good balance of challenging and like doable and entertaining.
I will correct you there. We didn't play it on the easiest mode. We played
Oh, did you not?
the easiest boss, but if you're struggling with the game, it does say there's an easy mode to it. We were basically playing on the normal mode. We weren't playing it on hard
Okay.
mode. On easy mode, the characters get a bit more health. I think Gravehold gets more health as well, and I think you take I think you take the Nemesis down by a little bit as well. So you get just kind of like an extra little kickstart at the beginning of the game sort of thing. But I figured we wouldn't need it, and luckily we didn't. So yeah,
I'm not gonna lie, it got a bit hairy when we drew that minion that was like an 11 health, because it really shot the gameplay a little bit, didn't it? Because I think Ian was sort of setting up to kind of do some serious
I had
damage to the
enough
boss.
damage on the field to bring the boss down to like 8 health.
Yeah,
I
and
think
then
I had 10. I think I had 10 damage ready to
Didn't
just
we-
go, and then I ended up having to pump it into a minion just because otherwise the Gravehold would have taken too much damage.
yeah,
yeah. I feel like as well didn't we get to a point where the Gravehold, because of that, started struggling a little bit? It got
It
down
did,
to about
yeah.
8 or 9 or something.
yeah.
I think that was always our plan though, because I'd had my shield ready, which was next time the boss did something, we just cancel the card. Which
Yeah.
you know,
I think-
it's perfect trigger for us.
I think it
to win.
was interesting though because the game knows how to throw a spanner in the works as well. Because I think we actually finished it one turn later than we could have potentially, but it could have been even worse because the boss drew an ability that said everyone with a prepped spell of cost 2 or more has to discard that card. And luckily, I was the only person at the time that had a spell prepped that was had a cost of 2+. But we would have done it even earlier if it wasn't for that. So the boss will throw some nasty surprises up, and just because you feel like you've got a plan in place, the boss does have a few nasty tricks up its sleeve. Most of them are avoidable, because the majority of the really nasty stuff tends to come out in these power cards that the boss plays, where you'll put a number of power tokens on it, and every time it gets to the boss's turn, it takes one of those tokens off, and that ability will only trigger once the last token is taken off of it. So you can kind of look at it and say, right, we really don't want this to happen, so we're really going to have to try and pull together to get rid of that power before it triggers. Or sometimes you might look at the power that's triggering and say, actually, I think we can take that right now. Let's just leave that and get more damage on the boss. And it's lots of decision making like that that's really, really neat. I think we did figure out as well that even when we felt like we've got this and got this one, I think that we did figure out there was one scenario where it could have all gone downhill. I think it revolved around if the boss got 2 turns in a row, which is very possible. I think
It
I would have
happened
put us
quite a
in
few
a...
times. You know,
We figured out that if the boss got 2 turns in a row, it would have had enough of its tokens to trigger something on the minion's ability, which is why we killed the minion first. So we could have just killed the boss outright or something at one point. and we decided to kill the minion first because it was safer, but it, lasted a bit longer. Like
Yeah.
there was a possibility that if the turn order had come up right, we could have just killed it outright.
I mean,
But then it drew a minion, and we had to kill that, and it's
I think that's
yeah,
one of the I think that's one of the takeaways from this is a lot of the times when something really bad happens, it's because of a decision that you made as a group. Like maybe you decided to take a risk and it didn't pay off. There's a lot of that in this game, which I think makes it very fair in a lot of ways. Like sometimes there are certain things like the Nemesis getting 2 turns in a row can really screw everything over because it means there is the possibility that the Nemesis goes, readies a couple of things ready, and then immediately gets to trigger those things before you have any chance to react to it. But again, we got saved in our game by the fact that Aeon had prepped his defensive ability. Because I think that's what we figured out, that even if the boss got 2 turns in a row on the last round of the game, you could stop one of them with your power, and then it was all dependent on what happened with the second one.
yeah.
Because I think there was a chance that the boss could have still gotten us on that one, but we certainly mitigated that chance and made it more unlikely. Because when damage is dealt in this game, it tends to be heavy too. There were plenty of occasions where we were losing. It would say one character loses 4 health, so that is more than a third of their health gone. Like without healing, 2 more attacks like that, and a character is exhausted. Gravehold, which starts with 30 health, there were an awful lot of attacks which said Gravehold suffers 5 damage. So it doesn't take long for that to get chipped down, and then when you've got minions out as well. Yeah, when you've got minions out as well, because the minions all tend to have things where they didn't do anything directly, but would usually say persistent, Gravehold takes 3 damage. So at the beginning of every Nemesis turn, it would take 3 damage each time. And I think when we got to the end of the game, we had 2 minions out. I think both were doing 3 damage to Gravehold, I think. So Gravehold would have been taking 6 damage every turn, but we knew we'd be able to kill the boss off before any of that really triggered. So,
And we had I guess it's the effects, wasn't it, of stuff where if we didn't discard over time either resources or whatever, we had a couple of turns to do stuff, and then eventually it would trigger something nasty. I've frozen, but I'm assuming you can still hear me.
yeah.
You look like you're in the middle of singing. What is it?
Oh, you're back.
Steve Winwood.
Oh, what? Higher level.
Yeah, you look like you're about to sing Higher Love.
Be a higher love. Yeah, that could have been
Nice.
nice, beautiful. But yeah, it's there was a lot of similarities to quite a few other card games, but just with the sort of plots and stuff. But I thought it was really good. I would love to play it again, and just mix it up a little bit, like you say, just try all the different options and stuff.
Yeah, I would say the one criticism that we had on the night of it is something that Ian brought up, where you said not a lot of the lore doesn't match the mechanics of the game.
Yeah, I feel like if the person who made it was there in front of me, they could explain what did what. But I definitely had a moment where I was like, yeah, I'm playing like a blacksmith character, but like his ability is that he puts a shield up that protects the house, and like there's like relics, so like there's items you can use. Wouldn't a blacksmith's ability be like making the weapon items more readily available, or doing something like that, or like making them cheaper? I know that was my thoughts when I read through a lot of them. So Daryl, what was yours again, Daryl? I read yours and I thought that felt like something that.
So my ability was I could stop either. So when you would draw the turn card, I could stop all damage to either players or the Gravehold, and then just that would be it. That turn would be done. So my character had the ability to basically, in her lore, it was like she travelled through time in a way. so she was a seer, wasn't she? So
Yeah.
she sort of went through and knew all the various things. In my mind, she played a bit like Nicolas Cage in Next, where he can see all paths, and then but he's still in the moment. That was my kind of impression, that she could see, okay, well I can't go left, kind of thing.
She
And then
she looks
basically-
deep into the future, screams pachinko at someone.
yeah.
Stops taking damage.
Yeah, so in my mind, her kind of character worked really well. I still have no idea why she was handicapped with having only three of the three portals breaches rather than the four that the other guys had. It was a really weird. There didn't seem to be a trade-off as to why her ability was good, but it wasn't like her ability came quicker than others. I know a couple of her breaches started in a better position. There was a couple that I think
Did
she
you
had a
get more
14
extra damage earlier as well?
Yeah, so in other
Yeah,
words,
so
you could
I
get
I
those
did
up
have
quick.
that, but then I could only it did mean that I couldn't stack, say, like the one where it was like you have the more you have open, you take one extra for each one. So I was only ever
It's a
gaining
rare turn,
3
though,
damage.
so I didn't get a single turn where I had 4 spells out at once.
Mm.
So
I think the one thing I would like to do and properly try through is I'd like to try and get to a point where we've sort of got our plan down. So say like one of us is doing healing and doing something else, or one of us is doing something else, one of us, and then it's a case of kind of burning and destroying a lot of the chaff we've got in our decks, because that was the problem. It was drawing a lot of crystal cards or jade cards, which we needed in the first couple of scenarios where we needed to build up the money to buy, say, the 6, 5, or 7 cost spells. But at the time that we were trying to use them, it was almost too late, because they were either lost underneath sort of 6 or 7 jade cards. So I think that's what I would like to. I'd like to have another go and kind of realize the point where you need to kind of get rid of. I know Steve sort of burnt a few, and you bought the bottle one, didn't you? I can't remember what it was, the like relic that allowed you to get rid of 2 and
Yeah.
do the thing. And I think that was quite a good play to try and weaken off once you've got, like you say, to a set position where all you really need is spell cards. You don't need to buy anything anymore. You can kind of start getting to a point where you're burning the rest of the stuff away because you don't need it, and then it's just more about pulling the spells to do the serious damage in the end game, kind of thing. But I mean, we got there. Like with you, the like I said, Stephen and Ian had very much the damage control down to a fine art. Ian had a lot of, like you said, the cards that would allow someone to look through their deck. Sorry, not look through their deck. Would allow them to draw a card and discard a card, which really helped some of the plays. The wild card really helped Ian a couple of times because Ian knew he had another set of spells coming in his next sort of set, so he could sort of do 6 to 8 damage or whatever, and then he knew immediately once they were gone, he would lay down the next one, and then when his turn hadn't even been used that round, I think a couple of times that happened, where his turn was like towards the end, he could then do it again, so it was almost like double hitting in a round, which really knocked it. Considering the character, would it start off with 70 or 60 health, did it, the enemy?
70.
Yeah, so it's quite daunting when you look at it, because we were sort of where you think realistically we've only got 10 health and it's got 70, and you're sort of at the start all you're doing is 1 damage per spell, and you start kind of really having to think like, well, I'm only chipping away a damage at a time, this is going to take ages, and then it's cool once it starts all leveling up.
I was going to say, because there's an interesting flow to the game, because taking off that first 35 damage off of a 70 health boss can feel like it takes ages, and in that time span you can kind of start thinking to yourself, God knows how we're going to do this. But that second half of the game, by the time you've all made up your decks and stuff like that, all of a sudden the boss's health is just plummeting down. So usually you can I would say don't be put off by this game if you feel like it starts slow, because it will pick up towards the end. If you've built your deck right and you've kept it trim and you're doing a lot of damage on every turn, all of a sudden you're dealing like 8-9 damage to this boss every single turn, and that 35 is going to get whittled down to nothing in no time.
yeah.
So yeah, that's quite interesting. It's worth noting as well, we also had another spell in the game which we couldn't quite afford.
It was
There was,
a 7,
there was
wasn't
one
it?
turn where I could have afforded it, but I had to use that in order to stop a minion doing something or stop an effect from the boss.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but
I think so.
I think I also realised after the game that my character would probably work quite well by not focusing on damage and instead focusing on buying lots of currency cards, like the gems, which would give me more power. Because if I could have turns where I could constantly build up my power and just keep triggering that, it had a power where I could allow another player to draw four cards, so they would have a massive hand by the time it came round to them, so they'd be able to do a hell of a lot more with it. That would have been kind of cool to use, but it kind of like, it feels like you almost need to think ahead as to who you want to act as your support and who's going to be doing the bulk of the damage in it. It kind of feels like you're better having people specialize in certain areas in this game rather than everyone kind of trying to make a bit of a middling kind of deck where they can do a bit of everything. Because if they do that, then chances are you're not going to get the things come up that you need on every single turn. So again, it just takes that little bit of planning for that as well. But it's interesting to perhaps move around and see who wants to try playing what turn next time and try and find the ideal ways of working each of the characters. Like, that would be kind of interesting. And going back to the thematic thing, I think if any character should have started with breaches closed, it was probably going to be my character, because thematically they were the only character that wasn't a mage as well, I think.
Yeah,
So
that's the thing. I was a mage and a seer, so I was just. There's obviously some reason. I don't know if we didn't look at the other characters, but I don't think
You did
they were
say
all
there
the
was
characters.
expansions as well, right?
Oh, there's tons of expansions for this, yeah, and I think I'm very interested to explore them in the future. This definitely feels like a game that I could get more invested in, I think.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, that is, in my opinion, a very minor quibble over what is otherwise a very, very good game that I think I would more than recommend to people, I think. At least get most people to at least give it a try, because it's a really fun game.
It is very good.
Agreed.
So, with that, we are just over the hour mark. I can't remember the last time we finished a podcast like so close to an hour before, but that's it this time. Hopefully, we'll have a few more things to talk about next time. We'll see how it all
You're
goes.
welcome. We're gonna go early. You're welcome.
This was even after.
We could have droned on for another half an hour. We won't. We got you back.
No.
You're welcome.
Respect.
And in that case, if you would like to follow us on the social medias, you can find us on Instagram at Everybody Dice Show or on Twitter at Everybody Dice. Our Facebook page is down there, but for our podcast listeners, that's facebook.com/Everybody Dice. If you could also like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this around, or perhaps even just leave a comment down below. That all helps us out greatly. And finally, for our YouTube watchers, there should be some stuff on screen right now, somewhere down there, if you can click some of those too. Again, super helpful for us. Apart from that, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time. Till then, bye.
Bye. Bye. Goodbye.